Hello, this is Chris Pfluger, the Chief Development Officer here at We Insure, and today's We Wonder is very specific. So today we wonder, what does the future of the sales process look like, right? And the reason today is so important is about a year ago we had Darren Dawson, the CEO of and president and co-founder, president and co-founder Darren Dawson.
Give me an upgrade there. Thanks, Chris.
That's right. From BombBomb on here. And we were talking a little bit about, hey, this is the middle of a pandemic. And people are flocking to everything that's online, whether it's Zoom, whether it's, and really more heavily utilizing BombBomb than ever, right, at that time. Because we couldn't go out and see people. We couldn't touch them. We couldn't feel them. We couldn't get out there to conferences. And it really was, kind of what we knew all along was a great method of contacts. It should be part of everybody's sales process. It really allows you to kind of rehumanize. I think we used that term before many times. The sales process, you're not hiding behind, voicemail messages or sending another round of random emails. This really makes it much more personal. So, Darren, how are you?
I'm doing great. Enjoying, I'm on vacation right now, but having a good time with you this morning.
That's how dedicated this guy is to getting that message out there. He joined.
That's right.
We really appreciate you joining us. And I think it's a serious topic, right? I think it's one of those things where we're both looking at this thinking, man, what's going to happen now that we're a year later and we're coming out a little post-COVID? It's still lingering, right, worldwide. But today it's a little different in the United States than it was last year.
Yeah, a couple of things happened, I think. And really, we're actually writing another book. It's coming out in November, and it's going to have a lot of this content in it. But it's called Human-Centered Communication is the name of the book, coming out in November. Written by Steve Passanelli and Ethan Butte, our chief evangelist and CMO. They wrote a book before called Rehumanize Your Business, as Chris was kind of mentioning. That's kind of our tagline. But we learned a lot of stuff in COVID, Chris. It changed everything. But here's what happened, and maybe you experience this too. We call it digital pollution, is what happened. So when everyone was locked down, everyone basically said, well, I can't be in person. I'm just going to send more stuff, like just more. So it's always been kind of bad where even after I get off this time with you, if I looked at my email inbox or my LinkedIn, whatever service, I will be inundated just with a lot of people trying to get my attention. I think COVID, it accelerated that to this almost like nuclear level proportions, because it's all you had as a business. And I think maybe listeners, you might relate to this, that you just get more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And so what we've tried to do is combat that, with rehumanizing these messages by making it more, not personalized, personal. And I think that as we talk about how sales is changing, because so many people went that direction, and we're finding it acceptable to have 2%, 3% open rates. But that just makes us send much, much more volume of stuff. And this could be on Messenger even. This could be text. I don't know how many more texts I can get from realtors. I don't know, wanting to buy my home. It's just a little nuts. And so, let me ask you a question, Chris. So that you've experienced this, right? Mm-hmm. Do you believe when you get these emails from people or texts or even on LinkedIn maybe, do you believe they're actually from a real person?
I believe they are most times, yeah. Now the text, I'm not sure, but in the emails, I think it is from somebody trying to get my attention.
But do you think they actually wrote those? Or do you think they actually sat down and they're the ones delivering 1,000 emails a day or something?
No, I don't.
Yeah. So someone wrote them, but the person with their name attached to it, I don't believe really did, right? So it's just all a part of this kind of economy of scale. Like, we got to have a scalable process here. And I would just argue that maybe what we need to think about more is, who is our best customer? Where are they? Who are they? Really spend time identifying that and reach out to them with a message that's very sincere and personal to them. Much like we might do if we went to events. Again, I know we're going to talk about events, like what happened to events, but what did you do when you went to a conference? If you saw somebody at a breakfast event or a lunch or something, how would you approach them? That's not how we're approaching people digitally, right? We're approaching them very cold even things that we feel are warm, I feel are cold. So I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, or but I sure can. So what we're trying to help people do is just open up in a warmer way, in a more personal way, with video, right? So I think a lot of people think about this in an outbound function too. Like video is for outbounding, and we're talking right now about outbound, like cold outbound a lot. And it does work well there. But I think it really helps once you start to get a relationship built. So if you have an existing relationship and you want to really deepen that relationship, using video through the sales process really helps that as well. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, or we can go into that direction. Yeah.
Well, really what it comes down to is, we've talked about this many times, right? It's part of the sales process that we use. It's something I've been using for many, many years. Yep. And I think that, especially the use of BombBomb very specifically, because the metrics on the back end and the ability to deliver that message in a couple different ways, right? So I can send it as an email, I can send it as a text, I can use it on social. I have flexibility on the message that I'm putting together. And it could be as easy as saying, hey, I just saw that you had a birthday. I want to say happy birthday to you, so-and-so. I haven't seen you in 10 years, or hey, the last time we talked 2 years ago at a conference, just wondered how you're doing. Give me a buzz back.
And I would tell you, Chris Pfluger is one of the best people at check-ins and just these small, how you doing? What's up? Happy birthday. Very good. But being that personal person, that's how you keep a relationship going over time, right? I think that's great. The other thing that we've seen though, that became a part of sales process, I think during the pandemic, that I think is staying, is a proposal review. So this can be any document. So at BombBomb, we allow you to record your screen. So let's say you had a conference call with someone, you did a sales discovery call, or you presented your product, whatever it might be. And then that follow-up, they create a video with a screen recording of the presentation with the main points. And maybe that person had questions, so you review those questions that they had, go over them again, and get to the finer points. And of course, you put your ask for the business in there. It could be anything. It could be an insurance proposal. It could be a DocuSign that you want them to complete. But you send that, and here's the deal. The cool part about sending that piece with the video is then that gets shared throughout what we call the entire buying committee, maybe. So this might not be the decision maker. Maybe they got to run up the flagpole, but now they can just send this whole piece, and we're not playing this telephone game, right? Like, well, what was this and what was that? Well, this is exactly what they sent, and here's the proposal, and you can just review it with them. So you kind of have this screen in, kind of like we are now. Mm-hmm. So you're in the bottom part of the screen. You can go through and review the document. You can actually record anything on your screen. So if you want to dive deep into any kind of chart or graphic or social proof or things like that, you can do that too, and then send it to the company that you're trying to get their business or the person, and then they share it either with their partner, with the buying committee, whoever that is. So that has become super effective. And then we actually see that collapsing the deal cycle, right? So the time to close, which is a big deal. I mean, if you can collapse your time to close in any kind of deal cycle, you can make more deals in a year, thus more revenue in a year, meet your number, that kind of thing, right? So that was one of the most interesting things we saw. Again, everyone thinks about it in terms of prospecting, trying to get opportunities. I think another great place for video is in the deal itself, in collapsing that deal time to close, helping the deal cycle be shorter for you.
That's fantastic. And again, I think people were getting creative, right? So you saw the really, really, really good salespeople say, listen, I'm going to double down on what I'm doing, but I'm going to get creative on how I do it and how I make those contacts, because everyone was home. My question for you, though, is going forward, right? Now we're a year later, people are not wearing masks in a lot of states. They're not, it's opened up quite a bit. The question is, now everyone wants to go on vacation. Like everybody wants to go to Hawaii. Everybody wants to go to Bora Bora. Everybody wants to start traveling, right?
That's right.
How do you maintain that level of, intensity, that level of value, that, how do you get their time? How do you keep in front of them when everybody is now out there, right? Going.
Yeah, I still think the example I just gave you will stand that test, because that proposal review in person with the sales rep, that's super good. And doesn't go away no matter what happens, right? I think that's one of those things that's just going to stay. I think people are going to get back in person, but some of these check-ins, follow-ups, really what video brings to you, and why we called the book Human-Centered Communication, is a customer experience that is different than your competition, okay? So listen, like if everyone else is kind of doing the same thing, like we talked about in the beginning, they're just sending a lot of email, a lot of communication, but it's very text driven. Who do you think, or why do you believe most people choose your business? I'm going to say, okay, you got to have a good product, but they're typically going to choose your people. They like you. And so when you're going through the process, maybe you're competing with another vendor for business, and they experience you differently if you're doing these videos. So they get to kind of know you, even if you're not traveling to the location, maybe you do that, but then how do you treat them along the way? How do you introduce other people in your company to them? You can do that through video, and you're creating an experience that I think is different. So for me, like I'm in software, right? So listen, I can build anything my competitor has, and my competitor can build anything that I have.
That's true. Yeah.
Really, right? It's just time and resources, and you can build the features. So the feature competition thing isn't really where I compete. I want to compete on how I make people feel that BombBomb is going to take care of them along the way. And so I think this really becomes, if you're in the same boat, that, what's your unique selling proposition? Because if it's customer service or features, I think you might have a problem. But if you're like me, my people are amazing. When you meet them, you want to work with them. I feel like you might want to work with me. And so I want to give you that feeling, that human-centered feeling. And feeling isn't something you can, conjure from text and things like just not. You actually can get bad feelings from getting these things, right? Like it can be misconstrued. And so what I want to do is create a feeling of what it's like to work with BombBomb. And then through that process, while you're working with me, we're going to continue to send videos. So check-ins along the way. How's it going? What's going, quarterly business reviews with the customers. That all happens in the context of that you have a face that is your person, and you kind of get to know them over time because we're using a more of a human experience along the way. And it's a different type of customer experience. And I really believe that it gives you a differentiator against your competition if you're doing it.
I think you're exactly right. And I do think that's going to stay because we're using it before, right? We're using it before, and now people had to get creative, and they were trying to get a hold of folks because of a pandemic.
Yeah. So are you going to go back to just text and stuff now? So we have this wonderful woman named Elia. She's a customer success manager, and trust me, like seeing Elia on a video talking about whatever, either we're solving a problem for you or we're talking about some new feature that we got coming out. You want to receive that from her in a personal way, and you feel like you're being taken care of by Elia. Elia, you know what she looks like, you know what she is. I think this is the difference, that this experience needs to change. Our customer experience needs to change. Let's get rid of the digital pollution, frankly, because it doesn't get opened. Like I just delete it in mass, right? Like, would you like to opt out? Yes, I would definitely like to opt out. Like I don't want this anymore. So I think that's going to change. I think there's going to be like this rejection of what we did, the apocalypse of the onslaught of communication a bit.
Well, that's actually great news because I think all of us would appreciate that. Right?
Right.
Even as a sales professional myself, that's not the way I like to approach it. So avoiding that would be much better for me because it makes it difficult for people who are actually trying to gain traction and build those relationships to break through all the noise. So
right.
with that being the case, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff on CFOs saying, hey, listen, we're not even going back fully to the office yet. So, as that starts to come in, and we may only do a few days a week, we may do shifts and those things, things that we think are going to stay. I mean, you obviously went to a lot of conferences. I went to a lot of conferences, whether it's conferences or conventions or shows or whatever it is. What do you think about that? I mean, is that still a few years off, or do you think people are going to start migrating toward that, or is it even worth it anymore?
It's a great question. I think it's going to come back. I think initially people are going to be all over it. To be back together again, perhaps. Time will tell. I really don't know. I don't know if I have a good crystal ball on that. I mean, I know that we're approaching that differently because in the absence of conferences, really it did not hurt our bottom line. I don't know what you think about that. So you got to think about that. Like, why did that happen? Is it that necessary? Because those things are very expensive. But I think the relationships built at those things is really valuable too. And so in a way, I think that having people there and being present and building relationships is very key. So I'm going to be a proponent of that. You touched on something else though, how most people are not really returning to the office. That we're going to go to what we're doing is like a remote with a hub. So where we have, almost 160 people in an office, we'll have probably 40 there most of the time. And then there's other people kind of coming and going on a scheduled basis with their manager. And so that, for us, the reason we can do that, and one of the reasons we figured out too that we were able to do that so quickly when the pandemic hit, is because we were already using video internally. Mm-hmm. So today we're doing our President's Club in Hawaii. That's where I am. And, I haven't seen some of these folks, but I've seen them. Right. So we've either done Zoom calls, but we send videos back and forth. We use Slack internally. You might use Microsoft Teams or something. So you can use video messaging within those things too, and those platforms. And it really helps you stay connected when your company is distributed now, maybe. And so maybe you had people move, we did, or like, hey, okay, can I go live in Wisconsin and do this job? Yeah, yes, you can. Great. Well, and so, but how are we going to stay connected? How are you going to maintain your culture? I started sending a Friday video update. We used to have a Friday lunch together. Now kind of update the business on what's going on. Now I send a Friday update every Friday through Slack into the channel for all hands, so they know what's up with the business. I do if someone's new to the company, I send them a, hey, I'm glad you're here. My name's Darren. I'm one of the owners. It's great to meet you. I wish I was there in person. But it's how do you build these relationships internally? So it's internal communication. Sometimes, HR knows this better than anybody. Is anything misconstrued? Your tone was inappropriate. Email, right? Like, okay, well, let's not make it inappropriate. Let's do it with video and help people understand where you're coming from. So this internal thing is a big deal, especially with the distributed workforce.
Well, that's always the discussion, right? Is how to maintain a culture. And if you're bringing on new folks during a pandemic, how do you introduce them to the culture and how do you maintain that? Because they don't get to interact. And
how do they get to know who I am as a leader, what I'm about? You can write that all day long, but of course you want to meet them. So you might be using Zoom for that, or whatever technology. But I think we call it asynchronous. So it's video on their time. They can get it and they can watch it at their leisure, and so can your customers. But it works very well internally too.
And that it's watched because the back-end metrics show that they actually watched it. So
correct. So I know when I send that Friday update, I'm looking for who are my stragglers on the, it almost always is done by Sunday. Let's put it that way. They get to it. Yeah.
Well, Darren, I have to say it's been very informative. I really appreciate your perspective on a lot of the stuff because, it comes to my mind a lot, what happens next, right? A lot of people ask that, what happens next? And I don't think anybody knows exactly, but I think it's going to be, as we mentioned before, a bit of a hybrid, right? I think people do want to interact with them. Some people are like, listen, I've gotten real comfortable with this and I just moved to Florida. So I feel like, do I really need to put on long pants and go to a meeting? I don't know, right? So
you don't, Chris. How about this? You shouldn't.
Well, that's true. So no, that's really what it is. I think people have gotten comfortable in this. And again, productivity has increased in many, many companies. And so we look at that and say, boy, is this a better way to do it? Without the pandemic, though, very unlikely that you would have convinced any senior leadership or CFOs or anybody else that this would work and we'd be able to monitor folks and actually trust them to do the work. Now we were forced to do it. Everybody likes it. Saved a lot of money on a lot of different travel and expenses. You're thinking, maybe there is a future in this. So
I get it's exactly what happened to us.
Exactly. Well, Darren, I sincerely appreciate you joining me this afternoon, morning for you, and taking time away from your amazing, awards trip. And so we do appreciate it. And again, thanks for the insight.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
You got it. Have a good one.